Um, Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see so many familiar faces. It's been a week. This is a special called joint meeting to discuss automated license plate readers. It's a meeting of the Public Works Committee and the Public Safety, Beer and Regulated Beverages Committee of the Metropolitan Council of Nashville, Davidson County, here at 4:30 on March 9th. I would like to let ladies go before gentlemen and have Chairman Gamble make a few introductory remarks.
Thank you, Councilman Nash, and thank you for coordinating this meeting, and thank all of you for joining us. I'll just give a brief little recap of where we've been and how we got to this place today. As you all know, the Public Safety Committee hosted 3 community conversations over the last few months to educate the public about the proposed use of license plate readers in the public right-of-way in Nashville and discuss how they may impact public safety and privacy. Also, since that time, council members have held meetings to discuss the issue with residents in their districts. I actually attended a meeting that Councilman Taylor held on the subject for his district a few weeks ago. While we have been discussing legislation to expand the use of LPRs in the public right-of-way, it is noteworthy to mention that currently license plate readers are allowed in Metro Nashville for use on private property, and some neighborhood groups are currently using them to address crime in their area, such as in the Haynes Park neighborhood. Nevertheless, during previous meetings, it was discussed that while there may be some value in the use of license plate readers to solve and prevent crime that often occurs when the police are not present, there is concern within the community about how the technology could be misused by law enforcement and others to track and unfairly target Black and Brown communities, which have been historically targeted and discriminated against. The consensus has been from those meetings that if license plate readers are allowed in the public space, there needs to be transparency and restrictions on how they are used, safeguards for how the license plate data will be assessed and shared and stored, and accountability measures for misuse. And Councilman Nash has prepared a great agenda to guide us in our discussion today. And on the agenda, it does cover the location or deployment of the readers, data sharing and retention issues, as well as how the readers would be used. I would only suggest that we include or add accountability measures to this list that would include audit log review by an impartial group that would show and review who has accessed the data and how often the data has been assessed, and also a 2-step process to verify that the license plate reader data matches up with license plate numbers that come into the system to avoid incidents of mistaken identity. So with that, I will turn it back over to Councilman Nash. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Gamble. I think the Chairman Gamble's done a great job of kind of recapping how we got here and where we are. And I think makes a great point of so many of the things she spoke of. There's kind of a general agreement, I think, on if we implement this, all the things that we have to do to make sure we have transparent and we're held accountable. And I think if listening to different people, it may not all sound the same, but I think we agree on an awful lot. And I thought it'd be great to have a meeting where we have the time to kind of discuss where we have agreement and where there's disagreement. What are the particulars? Are we that far apart? Is there room for compromise or not? We were faced at the last first meeting of February with about 2 substitutes and all kinds of amendments, and I was hoping maybe we just kind of go through some of those and clear up some of differences. And so I'm going to try and facilitate this. again, I want it to be informal. I want us to be able to kind of walk through some of these in just kind of information sharing way. We're not going to, at least it's not my intent that we not vote on anything tonight. It's just kind of, where are we? I did think it important, what are the cameras being used for and how? Because I know there was some misunderstanding about that. From a law enforcement standpoint, there's kinds of two ways. One is to have them stationed in motor vehicles, police cars. There's a hot sheet. When I was first starting on the police department, at roll call, there'd be a sheet of paper on the table where it would list missing persons and stolen cars. You'd have a license plate, and hopefully maybe you'd recognize that, keep it in the car, maybe you'd see it. Well, automated license plate readers kind of automate that process. They're looking for those tags as the police officer drives around. The hot sheet is connected to the license plate reader in the software, and if they see a tag, a bell goes off, and in a car, you've got a police officer right there to decide how to deal with that incident. There's also poll cameras, like they have in Belmead, for instance, that set, and if one of those wanted plates goes by, the bell goes off in the dispatcher's office, and he can try and see if there's cars available to address whatever that might be, a missing person or like stolen car. And then we also are seeing them being proposed for parking meters. I don't know all the ins and outs, but in a brief conversation with Mr. Jameson yesterday, apparently it's going to be kind of a pinhole camera on most every one of the parking meters that is set up under this program. And it'll be tied to telephones. You'll be able to get a text message if you're just before it goes out of time. It'll allow you to have some more time if that's appropriate. And if you should drive off without making the correct payment, apparently it'll send you a little notice about that for payment. And then emissions control. Now, some of the former council people can probably tell me more about this, but I did have a short conversation with Tom Sharp today. The emissions cameras, apparently there's technology out there, sensors, that as a car drives by, it can measure and assess the emissions from that vehicle's tailpipe. And they need the camera so that they can identify the owner of that car. And if the emissions are good and proper, that person will get notified that they have passed their emissions test. They'll have an opportunity to mail in their $9 and then go to and get their license. And the health department thinks that will probably divert about 30% of the people that currently go to the garages where you get tested. You won't have to go there if you get one of those notices. And that's all it does. It's not tied to any law enforcement database. It doesn't ding you if you don't pass. You never hear anything from it. It's only if you pass, and you'll have the opportunity to bypass having to go to the garage. So that's kind of some of the different uses that they're out here now. And apparently that has already been authorized by council back in 1917. The contract is out there with a company from Knoxville, but at this time, they're still waiting on EPA to change some of the regulatory pieces that go with that. So we'll be hearing more about it once the EPA gives folks the go-ahead. So I think what I want to do, it seems to me, I know Councilman Rosenberg and Councilman O'Connell both have bills, for instance, that authorized vehicle-mounted cameras. So again, I'm sure there's people that, and anything I'm saying, we're painting with broad brushes here. We're kind of talking about somewhat of a consensus. That's not to say there isn't members here that are just dead set against the whole concept. So with that understanding, though, I think is there would you say that there's general agreement that vehicle mounted are okay, and it seems to be somewhat around the fact that you're less likely to be able to track a person's different locations. Councilman Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to you and Councilmember Gamble for putting this together. First, just to expand a little bit on what you mentioned about the emissions cameras, which work exactly the way you stated. There's going to be a piece of legislation introduced because we don't have enough LPR bills. Another piece of legislation requested by the administration that just very simply tweaks the way those work, because it sounds like they'd like to start moving ahead with some of that, either the contracting or implementation or some piece of it. It will simply remove a clause that says nothing can be included that identifies the driver, since you need to be able to send the notice to the car owner. It also removes the piece that says geographic data can be stored at all. The original piece of legislation said that there have to be 2 of these in operation at any one time to guarantee that you couldn't surmise the location of the driver based on when they were, when their vehicle was sensed that they passed emissions. So this piece of legislation will further strengthen those safeguards while also making it possible to do what this program is intended to do. With regard to the level of comfort with license plate readers, I'm not especially comfortable with them, whether they're mounted on a vehicle or on a pole. I do agree that there's less danger with the ones that are in a vehicle, and the substitute that I introduced, even though I'm not thrilled with the idea of heading down this road, is intended to be a compromise from where my preference would be, that allows those. So I think it's true what you said, that there is, certainly there are members that are not entirely comfortable with LPRs, but also at a place of recognizing that there might be a way that we can pilot the concept in a way that prevents as many of the potential pitfalls as possible. So thank you for the opportunity.
Councilman O'Connell, I think I saw you next, and I have Ms. Gamble up next.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I know you mentioned the dash cam piece that we're carving out an allowance for. I will say I'm doing that because I don't want my bill necessarily to be a blocker to a program that I think has, some administration support. But I'll also say I have been a public skeptic of the rollout of body and dash cams especially without a clear and comprehensive review of the policies that we've implemented for that. I don't think that, I think there was a period when we had some reform-minded folks looking for this as a transparency and potentially an oversight measure. I think, again, the question of whether or not somebody shows up to your door, pulls you over for a traffic stop, and suddenly a surveillance record begins, can be problematic from a privacy standpoint without extremely clear policies, which we have, frankly, Council has not yet had any kind of comprehensive review or discussion of the video policies of the Metro Nashville Police Department. I think it's something we should do. So that's just a brief comment on that. While I'm not going to stand in the way of the implementation of that program, it's also not something I would call myself a strong supporter of. I know it sort of has momentum, and I don't want to see us necessarily, sink costs in something we don't allow ourselves legally to pursue. But I would not say that carve out is something I'm particularly eager to see. On the bigger question of LPRs, I think we had a pretty good discussion about the smart parking piece where, and I think the emissions piece is also similar, where to me, this is about the narrow versus broad implications and applications. If we know that this is being used on singleton scenarios where it is very clear to someone that, okay, whether by virtue of participating in, like if you're doing on-street parking in an area that has clear signage, if you're going into an emissions program, and we on the flip side of this try to engender public trust in the process by saying we're not going to store your data for more than 30 minutes, and we have very clearly tailored policies. I do think there are some reasonable applications for narrow and targeted use of things like LPRs and other camera-based technology. I think the problem becomes when you move into a broader application where someone may not know, and we move pretty quickly into a posture where what we're doing effectively is saying, okay, at every intersection where there's a camera, think of this as effectively you're going through a checkpoint. You are having instead of a uniformed officer stop and asking you for ID, what you're doing is basically allowing for a small computerized system like a robot effectively to potentially checkpoint you and then build a web based on that data of saying, okay, not only were we checkpointing you at that location, we're assembling this data into a database that offers historic tracking of you. It moves us from a posture of assuming trust in one another to one of a suspicious posture when deployed too broadly. And I think that's the piece that concerns me, along with the privacy implications that could be used and frankly have been used in some cases to apply a discriminatory effect to the way people move around the city. And we've seen the same thing applied online. I think it is far better as we have conversations about equity in this city to operate from a posture of general trust and use law enforcement as a means to, yes, prevent in some cases through patrols and so forth, but not to create it as a web of surveillance where we're allowing that to kind of quietly take over a place where we build relationships, where we do community-based policing as a forefront posture, and that our overall posture is not one of suspicion, but one of trust. And we're delivering social services that help us do that.
Council Lady Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate all of the comments that have been made, particularly as it relates to the community policing piece that is already happening. Chief Drake, the MMPD, the mayor's office through the community or the Policing Policy Commission has already identified recommended policies and procedures to start implementing our community policing, and that's happening. I think the LPRs can be used as a tool to address crime in tandem with those things. I don't think it's an either or scenario. I think that as well as with the body cameras, I think that is another piece that will help improve public safety and fairness in our city. I do want to speak to the issues of the emissions testing and the parking. However, initially, having been involved in many meetings and discussions about the license plate reader proposed implementation, it was suggested that it would be done only to identify license plates that have been involved in a crime. And so there's not a surveillance of individuals coming and going on a regular basis. License plates, images are taken but aren't stored for a long period of time, between 7 to 15 days, and they are never pooled. That license plate is never pooled unless that plate has been identified in a crime and that number has been put into the system as one that they are needing to find out if that suspect has been, or where that suspect has traveled. So the idea of using a license plate reader for emissions and parking regulation, to me and to some others, suggests that is surveillance, because you're just surveilling individuals who are parking or individuals who are driving, and then identifying them as someone who either has passed an emission, which, I've talked with the representative from the heat company that I believe Metro has contracted with to implement this program through the legislation that passed in 2017. However, in that legislation, as it was mentioned earlier, it was not to identify an individual and send them a letter. So that would be a change that would need to be made to the legislation to allow that. Initially, the technology would only be used to collect aggregate data in a manner that does not allow identification of a person. And I've asked to find out how that aggregate data would be useful, or what problem that would help solve. And I guess from a health department standpoint, it could help identify the emissions levels or problems with emissions in our city as an aggregate data, but not identifying an individual and sending them a letter so that they won't have to go to the emissions testing centers, which I don't think is a problem. I haven't heard of any issues where there's long lines or problems with people going once a year to have their emissions tested on a regular basis. This, I guess, would provide a system where those who, for whatever reason, didn't want to do that could get a letter and get excluded from that process. I don't know that it actually fixes a problem, but it does provide a surveillance issue, as well as with the parking, because again, you're not identifying a license plate that has been involved in a crime, but you're again surveilling and identifying a particular person, or creating an issue where they're getting a ticket and that kind of thing. So those are some of the concerns that I've heard with attending meetings. People have concerns about using them as red light cameras, as parking for parking restrictions. However, the idea of using them to identify license plates that have already been involved or suspected in a crime, in an amber alert, silver alert, stolen property issue, has been something that has been better received, however, with the restrictions and with the policies and procedures that we talked about. Thank you.
Council Lady Johnston.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for putting this on to the both of you. I don't think right now, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, for example, if Public Works was to use LPRs for the parking, or if the health department was to use it for emissions, that those databases or would be connected to the police database, for example, so that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would really, it should calm some people's fears as far as a surveillance type thing, because they're separate. It's not like they're watching what you're, I don't know. To me is three very, very separate things. It bothers me when we say surveillance, because nobody wants to be surveilled, I don't think. But there would have to be thousands upon thousands upon thousands of cameras at just about every intersection along every single road to know where someone is going specifically. In Memphis or in Shelby County, they have about 250 cameras throughout a 790 square mile county. That's not near enough to be able to say that Courtney Johnston goes to the Nippers Corner Publix once a week, or, you know, it just would be really, really hard to do that. I think what we have so far is a really good policy to affect change from a public safety perspective, in that we are able to solve crimes, we're able to find stolen vehicles, and even more importantly, we're able to prevent crimes from happening, because where those LPRs are, we've seen in all of the municipalities that I've talked to, especially the ones around Middle Tennessee, so Mount Juliet, in Tennessee, have just seen a decrease in crime. I want to stop these drive-by shootings from happening. I want to stop people's cars from being stolen. My problem with just limiting it to where in police vehicles is that we don't have enough police officers, and we have less cars than we have vehicles. And so if a police officer is already there, the job is almost already done. I'm not saying I don't want them in cars. I think it would be great, but I think we're going to have a much more profound effect on public safety from a crime reduction perspective if we have either the trailers or the pole mounted, because that's when people see that camera and they go, I'm not going to do a crime here. I'm going to go somewhere else, or maybe I'll just go home and not do it at all. We've talked about equity, and from an equity perspective, we have our private neighborhoods, our HOAs that have the money to pay for these things, that are doing it. It's our Black and brown communities that we're worried about unfairly targeting, who can't necessarily afford these cameras but want them. And Haynes Park is a perfect example of a Black and brown community that is desperate for a safer place to live. And so this is the perfect way to do that, in my opinion, in a cost-effective way. I don't think tonight is the night that we're going to talk specifically about the different bills, or maybe we are. Chair Nash, I don't know if you want to get into specifics, but I do think that there is legislation out there that really speaks to privacy, to accountability, to transparency. 582 specifically has the vast majority of that language was written by the ACLU. So I don't know how much, more, privacy centric we can get. I've got a meeting tomorrow. I had the Salahuddin Center call. They are ecstatic about getting LPRs and are wanting to support in whatever way. So I'm going to meet with them tomorrow. My diverse neighborhoods are excited about this, because I constantly get, can we get more patrols? We need the police. It's not surveillance. It's just a safety tool. And again, to speak to the equity part of it, is that an LPR is going to remove more suspects from the pool than they are going to implicate. Because if your car was there, your car was there. If it was not, it was not. They're not looking for a person. They're looking for a vehicle. And so a vehicle doesn't have a race or a color or a religion. So it's just this is nothing new. This technology has been around for well over a decade. It's gotten so much better. The technology has improved. The policies around it have improved. And so, frankly, I'm excited to be able to hopefully say that we, as a county, are going to be able to use this technology, or enabling this technology to be used to make our county safer. I mean, how many times are we getting emails with press releases from the police department about a shooting or, some sort of murder? I mean, it happens daily. It's amazing. I've got constituents that are scared to be in their front yard, to sit on their front porch. That's not the way to live. And so if there's a tool out there that we can use to help people be safer, I'm all for it, within reason, and to have a really solid privacy policy around the technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. I've got Pulley, Sepulveda, and then back to Rosenberg and O'Connell. Go ahead, Councilmember Pulley.
Who'd you call on?
You're the man.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Gamble, as well, for holding the meeting. I just wanted to make a couple of brief points. One, I think it's a little bit concerning to piggyback off of Councilmember Johnston's point that the word surveillance is being used so frequently as it relates to license plate reader cameras. What an LPR camera does is take a snapshot of a government issued license plate. And I think that having spent a large part of my career in law enforcement and the general public's view of that word surveillance means something entirely different. So again, all an LPR camera does is take a snapshot of a government issued license plate. And I think every judicial circuit in the country has agreed that there's no real reasonable expectation of privacy to that license, that government issued license plate. Secondly, another point would be in terms of misuse. I know there's been some points made about maybe some incidents in other areas of the country with respect to some kind of misuse. But the audit features here are really good on the data that is being provided by the license plate reader cameras. And in addition to that, there's some pretty substantial penalties, as you well know, Councilmember Nash, from your days on the police department for misuse of this information. Currently, police officers have access to way more, being able to run driver's license information, NCIC checks on people, and that gives them access to a far greater database than would be provided by LPR cameras. And any misuse of that information puts officers in extreme risk. And I'm sure that the police department has plenty of available data for anyone on any of those kind of instances which have occurred here. And the final point I wanted to make is that having served on the Policing Policy Commission, we've had an opportunity to review these policies. And to my knowledge, every one of the policies that the Metro Nashville Police Department has, including the video policy, is publicly available on their website. We certainly were able to access those policies with pretty much ease when we were going through them, looking at those policies with respect to some of the things that were suggested on Policing Policy Commission. So that's really all I have now. So I appreciate your time and thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Councilmember Sepulveda. You're up.
Thank you, Chair. So I have quite a few concerns regarding some of these bills that are up. And, I've spoken to people in the minority communities as well. And I think it's important for me to say that minority communities aren't the only communities I represent. And I have to say that for obvious reasons. But I also share a border with Councilwoman Johnston, and some of the minority groups I've been talking to have a lot of concerns and questions. Minorities aren't monolithic, and there's a lot of concern, and I've been told that we could expect some response to the council members from several of those groups. I serve the most, if not one of the most diverse districts in this city. And I hear, we need more patrol cars and we need more police officers. That doesn't mean we need more LPRs. I feel like we're masking what the problem is. And what Southeast Nashville has needed for a long time, which has been the police precinct and more officers. That's what we've been asking for in Southeast Nashville for a long time. And I feel like we're outsourcing police jobs. I mean, I sent a newsletter to my constituents several weeks ago with all of the Twitter posts from MMPD in which they show all of the cars they have stopped from speed racing. And so I feel like there's already programs and things that we could implement. And, it's this very slippery slope. And I've said this before. We give a little of ourselves away, and the next thing we know, it's a full-on, surveillance, and it is surveillance. It really is. That there's not another way to put it, in my opinion. So I would encourage you all to take a step back and recognize that there are several communities, and not just minority communities, but other communities in this city who have several concerns. And, several of us have been emailed by them. What works for one group doesn't work for another. And I think that there's a better way to handle all of this. We need to put more trust in the procedures that the police department has. But that is just one council member's opinion and several community members. Thank you.
We're back to Councilmember Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to draw on the distinctions a little bit between the parking program, the emissions program, and using this for law enforcement purposes. The emissions program guarantees, number one, that nobody can be identified as, their location isn't being identified, and the information is being used for a very limited purpose, and then not being retained beyond and for that use, which means that this data falling into their own hands is not going to identify where somebody has been, what they've been doing, or been able to create any sort of pattern. With respect to the parking, it's saying that if you choose to pull into one of our parking spots, then we're going to use this to show how long you've been there. And if you follow the rules and leave at the prescribed time, then that data is not kept at all, and therefore cannot be misused, cannot be used for any other purpose. The type of surveillance program that we're talking about with LPRs for law enforcement, where you can use it to charge people with a crime, fine them, imprison them, pursue them, or simply give somebody a really uncomfortable experience, is a very different thing. And the primary proposal here suggests retaining that information long enough for it to be used in ways that are, despite the best intentions, that can be used. I don't know that we want to go to a place where not only are we creating a robotic police force that is out there, patrolling the streets, in effect, surveilling the citizenry, but it can be used. It only takes one of them. It says if it's located out the side of the Nippers Corner Publix, it can be used to say that Councilwoman Johnson goes to the Nippers Corner Publix every week. If it's outside your neighborhood, it can be used to say when you leave your house and your house is vacant every day. I also think it's important to acknowledge that, for example, with Mount Juliet and Belmead, those are very compact municipalities versus Nashville, where if something gets pegged on, out here on Newsom Station Road, there's most likely not going to be an officer within 15 minutes of there that can do anything if a stolen car drives by there. I think the effectiveness of this is really being oversold. If we don't have enough officers if we don't have it, and this came up with the drag racing as well, if you don't have an officer right there, then you really have just, not done very much. I have a neighbor who likes to say Ring doorbell cameras are great for knowing when your package got stolen, and too much else. I don't know if I necessarily, if they're, if they can have their benefits, but I think that we're looking at this as some sort of a magic tool that's going to really change the face of crime in Nashville, and it's simply not. It will encourage changes in behavior, I think, more than anything, whether it's avoiding those routes that have the little blue lights on top of them. I do my best to not drive down Harding Pike because they've got like 15 of them in a row, or encouraging people simply to obstruct their tags or steal other ones. I think that we're underestimating the damaging ways this can be used and overselling the positive use when it comes to law enforcement. So thank you.
I have Councilmember Powell next, but there is time at the end of this for kind of the open discussion. And to the extent we can, I've tried to kind of list some topics where I wanted to see kind of where we were. So if we can kind of stick to the kind of topic at hand, I think that'd be helpful, again, in trying to decide where there's some agreement, disagreement, and so let's be careful about too much philosophical stuff about the program as a whole. I'm trying to do the little pieces as we go, if we can. Councilmember O'Connell, you're up. Stiles is on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I can. Thanks. I'll do my best to stick to these. I do think it speaks to when and whether something is surveillance, though, is actually in the details. And so for the broader applications, if people are uncomfortable with the word surveillance, I can stick to suspicion-based camera tracking of your whereabouts, but it's much shorter to use the word surveillance, which is effectively what that means. And I think I tried to outline my thinking about this in terms of the types of deployment at the outset. In most of these cases, storing the data is where the privacy implications arise, right? And so who keeps it, whether it's a private party or Metro, ultimately winds up being somewhat immaterial except for the liability basis and maybe the what is public policy basis from a philosophical standpoint. Ultimately, I think the best scenario is to store as little as possible for as little amount of time as possible. In terms of the types of deployment, I think that generally the location should be kind of connected to the use case, right? And so from my standpoint, especially as we are exploring the usage of this technology on a forward-going basis, our best bet is to be extremely narrow in the application, right? So that the emissions testing scenario makes some sense to me. It is not a surveillance measure when it is being used as a part of an opt-in application. I think the smart parking thing is very similar. If your license plate is being scanned and possibly stored for up to 30 minutes in relation to the parking that you're doing in a controlled scenario, that is very different than just sweeping up thousands of people's license plates across the city in a way that patterns can be detected. And it does not take very many cameras to understand patterns of movement that can be used to both implicate and discriminate, even in scenarios where crimes aren't being pursued. We've seen extreme discomfort with the use of data. I know I am not the only council member who got contacted early on in the process of our local response to COVID-19 when there was a question of how much data would be shared in law enforcement and other applications and how that data would be shared about your personal health with regard to responses. I think we ultimately there
got to a reasonable outcome about how it would be secured, how it would be anonymized, and how little would be stored and shared. And I think that generally should be the principle we apply here. This should not be one of broad application. And so in terms of types of offenses, I look at it and say, this should not be, I agree that we specifically should not be using LPRs for surveillance. We should be using it, if we use it at all, in very narrow scenarios that have a very clear public kind of benefit that is about automation and convenience. And the place that we should be skeptical of, to what I think Councilmember Sepulveda said and to what Councilmember Rosenberg hinted at, is this should not be a low-cost, convenient substitute for law enforcement where we are unwilling to justify the kind of person-based and the personnel-based approach there. My driver's license is a state-issued ID. And I will tell you that if I was stopped both leaving and coming back into my neighborhood to have to show my driver's license to a uniformed officer, it would absolutely change the way that I interact with my neighborhood and probably cause me significant misgivings about whether I was living in the right place. If we are saying that we prefer that to be a hidden function in a broadly deployed LPR scenario where the LPR is doing literally the same thing, and there's no way to say, hey, we're only surveilling the people who are doing the crimes, everybody's license plate is going to get read because you don't know whose license plate is attached to a car that's been involved in a criminal incident. So I don't want to substitute the hiddenness or the cost or convenience for, I don't want that to be the trade-off we're making here to say, hey, because this is easier and more discreet, we're far more comfortable with what actually in that application would be surveillance. And I think that's where, to me, the conversation needs to remain on, we're going to do this on a case-by-case basis for types of deployments that have clear public benefit and specifically steer us away from the territory where we actually are surveilling our citizenry.
Councilman McConnell, I do have to follow up with you on that and ask you, what has the license plate reader camera got to do with some officer stopping you and asking you for your driver's license?
Because if I had a license plate reader at the entrance of my neighborhood, when I drove by it, it would scan my license plate every time. That is effectively the same thing as showing your ID of any kind. If the Councilmember Pulley is making is that, hey, because this is a state-based license that you have no reasonable expectation of privacy, it is basically saying, yes, I belong in this neighborhood, or no, I don't. And having to show it, whether it's a camera or a person, is effectively the same function that's playing out there.
But your driver's license is issued to you personally and identifies you. The license plate on your car is not something you have in your billfold that I have to stop you for, and it identifies your car and the owner of that car, and that's kind of the limit of it. I don't want people to think because they have a license plate reader anywhere that they're automatically subject to being stopped. And I understand where you were going with that, but I think that kind of is not quite fair in the process. But that's
I appreciate there are some subtle distinctions there, and that yes, the driver's license is unique to me, whereas I could own multiple vehicles, right? And maybe but this is where Councilmember Rosenberg's point comes in, is it may be a process where instead you'd have to stick your driver's license up on the windshield so that it could be scanned instead of your license plate. But the effect is the same. It's not like I go around driving other people's vehicles to try to masquerade my entry and exit from my neighborhood, because generally I expect that no one is caring when I'm going and coming from my neighborhood. But that I lose that effect as soon as an LPR is installed.
I've talked to a couple of your neighbors. I'm not sure that's true. Are you finished? I don't mean to interrupt you.
That's all I've got.
Thank you. Council Member Style.
Thank you, Chair Nash, and also Chair Gamble. I just really wanted to speak to while I respect the opinions of the council members that are concerned about surveillance, I think that the legislation that is on the table does have language in it that addresses surveillance and privacy concerns. I do not know that there is a scenario that we're in where everything is perfect for everyone. I think this is going to be a conversation where we have to have a meeting of the minds to agree on what will work and what won't work. I think what we're hearing from constituents, what we're hearing amongst ourselves, is there is a desire for us to address crime, to address the fact that we have a police force that is understaffed. I don't think that LPRs are a substitute for police officers. I think this helps them in their duty that they have. We have a new precinct coming in the Southeast, but it's not going to be here for another couple of years. And of course, in mentioning, of course, street racing, I'm very familiar with that. And wonderful that we have drag racing assignments going on, but that's pulling officers from something else as well. And so this equipment can be very helpful. I think what we should be focused on is how do we draft a policy that can address privacy, surveillance concerns, and also the safety concerns, because we're getting emails, at least I've seen more emails in support of LPRs than against them. And I've heard the concerns, and I know I certainly have put language in my previous bill and as well in what's coming forth when we meet on April, in the first meeting in April. So I know that Chair Nash mentioned that there are very specific topics that he wants to talk about. And I think we should get to those elements, but with our minds being open to how do we find a compromise on all of this? Because the conversation is going to continue, and there is a need and there is a want here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Lady Stiles. Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for continuing to hold these meetings. I think the discussion really is important to have. I want to pick up on what Councilmember Stiles is saying, because I've certainly gotten, I would say, an even number of emails from people who feel like this is a safety tool that their neighborhood would like to be used, and from people who have concerns about privacy. And my question is, can we, in all the possibilities that we're looking at, consider language that would enable private groups to put up the cameras that they want to on their private property and aim it on public streets for the safety of their neighborhoods, and then cooperate with the police? And I think there's some interpretation now about whether our current law allows cameras that are mounted on private property to be aimed onto public property. And I see Mr. Rosenberg raising his hand, saying he'd be able to answer that. But that, I haven't heard many people say to me, we wish the police had more LPRs. I just have heard people say, we want an LPR in our neighborhood. And so then if we leave it to the choice of the people who feel like they need more protection and make it legal for them to do that. And again, I think what we're doing here by developing policy before there's actually equipment deployed is the right way to do it, rather than reacting after it goes out and going, oh shoot, we should have thought of that. I think we're doing a really good job of thinking of a lot of things, and that's great. And ultimately, then we'll decide if all it's going to be is for emissions and parking. But I would say a third piece of that addresses the public safety issues that we're hearing about are from private neighborhood associations that have specifically said, we want to be able to do this, and we're not sure if we can or we can't under the current law. So I just think that's a request from the citizens that we should keep in mind as we think about where and how these would be deployed. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. Before I have Council Lady Johnston next, but before we do that, I kind of want to go back to, and I guess this will be a little bit to Council members O'Connell and Rosenberg. If somehow we got all said and done, we had pole-mounted cameras. Now I know the pole-mounted cameras provide for you the greatest concern that, especially by the number of them and maybe where they're placed, we're going to be tracking folks and creating surveillance. I don't think a snapshot of a camera is necessarily surveillance. When I see surveillance, I see the guy sitting in the car outside your home watching you come and go and really getting in deep. But is there any number, is there any compromise about, all right, we're going to have poll cameras, but we have to limit the number? Is a limited number work for you? Or if we were to mount them on trailers where they would be moved occasionally, moved to neighborhoods that are having issues where we think they might, where the police department might think they're successful at addressing an issue, does anybody feel that that might be a nice option too, or not? I'm shutting up. Somebody speak up.
No. I'm comfortable with the number that we have now. And I would like, when you have the chance, I'd like to answer Councilmember Allen's question, because that's kind of evolved since we had that conversation at council. But whenever you're done with this round, Councilmember Nash. You're muted.
You're not comfortable with any mobile kinds of setups or any number of pole installed? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's accurate, yeah.
Okay. Councilmember O'Connell, I think you're kind of the other one, maybe Council Lady Sepulveda. Does that, does anybody have a comment on that?
Yeah, I can speak to this. Like Councilmember Rosenberg, I think pole-based permanent installations, we should be skeptical of increasing those numbers in any way. I could be persuaded that if we got the policy right for narrow law enforcement applications, it's kind of like SkyCop, that if there were severe problems in a neighborhood and we wanted to do something like that on a very time constricted basis, and also knowing that, like the smart parking scenario, we were not going to be doing persistent storage for any period of time beyond 30 minutes, say, that, whether it's drag racing or parking in a residential neighborhood, I could be persuaded that limited law enforcement application on a temporary, kind of use case based scenario, I can see the merits in that. I think the problem becomes, again, if we get just complacent about this and suddenly there is a hack, right? Or, somebody finds a way to systematically hack the camera so that even the storage becomes not even the main issue, and that video can be pulled offsite for storage that is not hackable itself. There are so many places where the security risks create privacy concerns that permanent installations here really, I think, should be viewed with extraordinary skepticism.
Okay, let's see, Council Lady Johnston, well, let me get back to Sepulveda if you're going to speak to this issue.
No, Chair, mine had to do specifically with a data point.
Okay. Then Council Lady Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important for everyone to understand that an LPR database, if you were to break into an LPR database, you're going to get some very useless information unless you have another database to cross-reference it to. For example, DMV, which is where your driver's license information would have. If you break into a database that says license plate number ABC123 white Honda Accord at the intersection of Harding and Danby at 12:52 p.m., what does that mean to you? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. I think everybody's concern is the police. That's going to be held on the same server as our NCIC database, more than likely, according to MNPD. NCIC databases are pretty serious to get access to in the first place, and they're highly, highly protected. So I have no concerns about the physical compromise of that data at all. But again, it's totally pointless information to you or me or really anyone that doesn't have access to multiple databases to cross-reference it to. When we talk about private parking and the parking aspect of it and how long it's going to be stored, when you go to a private parking lot and you go to the little kiosk and it asks you for your license plate, that's the exact same thing. You're giving them your data just like it's going to automatically do. It's just not surveillance. To the point that the public safety aspect is being oversold, I would challenge anybody that thinks that the benefit of this from a public safety perspective or any perspective is being oversold to speak to other municipalities, constituents in those communities that are using them because they love them, the police departments love them. Anything can be weaponized. Anything can be weaponized. A number 2 pencil, I could stab someone with a number 2 pencil in their neck and kill them. We're not gonna ban number 2 pencils. They're obviously a useful tool. And I know that's a little bit tongue in cheek and a little bit of an extreme, but truly, I think, this has so many benefits. If we can come to an agreement around policy with privacy and accountability and transparency, the benefits are going to far outweigh any sort of concern that people have. It's not a substitute for law enforcement. It's an accoutrement to law enforcement, and we do need more law enforcement officers. How are we going to get those? I don't know. Where's the money going to come from? How are we going to recruit? How are we going to retain? Those are issues that are well outside of this. As far as the question of do I feel comfortable with them on the poles or in the police cars, I'm comfortable with them wherever. If I could put one in my yard, I would. It is a service to the citizenry. I know, I feel it in my bones that when my house was burglarized in 2017 and literally everything was taken that meant anything, I know that if we had this technology, I know that if we had this technology, that I would, through my Ring camera, who I saw back into my driveway, that we could have pinged whatever the cameras were around to see what is a late model dark SUV that was in this area at 6:15 in the morning or whatever time it was. And I feel so strongly that we would have found them. What if someone had been murdered? What if someone had been raped? I mean, I'm talking about, some rings and some jewelry that's been in my family for generations. But what if it was a really, really serious crime? We have to be able to service our community and protect them. And this is a tool to do that. Sorry.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm going to go to Dave Rosenberg, Councilmember Rosenberg, to answer to Councilmember Allen's concern. Then I've got Gamble, Cash, Sepulveda, and Parker.
You're on mute.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Councilmember Rosenberg. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was just saying that also, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Porterfield is a attendee. Her number ends in 3068, and she would like to speak when she's got the chance. I don't know if she has to be promoted or what. Councilmember Allen asked about the privately owned LPRs. And when this first came up at council, I stated my position, which is still that our current ordinance prohibits that. It turns out that question is moot. An opinion from an attorney in town who I respect quite a bit suggests that we do not have the constitutional right to prohibit a private entity from putting a camera on their own property, no matter where it's pointed. So I can think of a lot of ways that can go awry that don't involve an HOA trying to look out for cars getting entered, but it's at this point, it sounds like the question is moot. We can't do anything about it one way or another.
Thank you for the clarification. That's my understanding also. Council Lady Gamble.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that update, Councilman Rosenberg, on that issue. Just going back to the Chair's initial point of location and asking about how we feel about the location of placement or deployment of the cameras, in addressing equity and lack or trying to reduce the issue of discrimination. It has been shared at many meetings with community members that having cameras deployed in neighborhoods should be up to that private neighborhood, not Metro. We should be looking at, if implementing this, public streets, major arteries, roadways, exits to interstates, things of the areas of that nature, but not private streets. We definitely don't need to look at placing them in high crime areas, because that again is a perceived discrimination or equity issue. So just, I wanted to say that about the location. And then one other question about the parking. I'm not sure, again, just trying to figure out what use or what problem we're trying to solve with that. If we're already using, if these parking attendants and companies already use cameras and use the LPRs for your license plate when you park, why do we need to use them in that respect? So anybody that can add to that, because again, if we're using these license plate readers on public right-of-ways, public streets, wouldn't that, on a private parking garage or meter, isn't that a private company that are already using them? I'm not sure how that would benefit our constituents in that way.
Mr. Nash, can I answer that one real quickly?
Yes.
Oh, only because I followed the parking enforcer around one day, and he does not use one. He uses a legal pad and a memo pad, and it is very 19th century technology that he uses. In the meantime, the guys at Park Happy and Premier and all the other parking spots have a guy who walks around with his phone and in very short order can get all the information he needs about who's parking legally in his parking lot, and it's very efficient. And they are managing their curbs very well, and we are not, because we are using very, very low tech technology. Thank you for letting me jump in.
Does that kind of speak to your question, Councilmember Gamble?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Councilman.
Councilmember Cash, you've been so patient. You're up.
My pleasure. Thank you. And actually, a big part of what I wanted to discuss and ask about Councilman Rosenberg and his what he shared about the opinion that was passed down kind of negates a good part of my question, because I was really having trouble with it seemed like at times we were getting bogged down between the public and private, or maybe not getting bogged down or not making enough of a distinction between those two uses. And I had real problems with disallowing private individuals from operating, from having access to this technology, since they did not have access or should not have access to the database of who that license plate belongs to. And I don't think that there's any reasonable expectation of privacy of a license plate on a public street. When we get into surveillance or tracking or pinpointing different places, gathering the data to pinpoint different places in, that a car has been in town, that's the key thing that I'm having trouble with, and want to make sure that we have a really strong policy that disallows that. I don't think there's any privacy violation in taking capturing a record of a license plate. In fact, if we cover those license plates, we would be in violation. So I am listening carefully to make sure that the surveillance part of it and tracking in different parts of town is something that we can prevent and avoid, so that we can use this technology in good ways. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember. I have Councilmember Sepulveda up next, but our tech person I don't see Councilmember Porterfield on my screen. Do we need to upgrade her? Can you check on that?
Yeah.
Our host? IT person? Ms. Kenya?
I'm sorry, I'm here.
Councilmember Porterfield apparently wants to be on this call, and I don't see her. Does she need upgrading?
Is she calling you or is she not on the call at all?
She's an attendee. She's 615-208.
Okay, I can unmute her. Hold on one second.
Okay.
There you go, Ms. Porterfield. You should be able to speak now.
Thank you so much, Chair. Are you able to hear me?
We are. Councilmember Sepulveda, do you mind if Ms. Porterfield goes first?
Not at all, Chair.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Porterfield, since I'm not on camera. And I appreciate the rich dialogue that everyone is having. I had a bit of an emergency, and I was in the car with my 13-year-old daughter while we're listening to this conversation coming through the Bluetooth of my car. And my daughter made such a great observation. It was interesting. I didn't even have to point it out to her to kind of respond to one thing that Councilmember Johnson said with regards to the parking. A huge difference is that when you park at a parking spot and you go and you put in your license plate number, you are willingly given that information. That information was not captured and you didn't know about it. It wasn't captured while you were coming in and out of your neighborhood. You willingly gave that information up. And if that's an argument that a 13-year-old can come up with without having any prior knowledge to the conversation, we have to realize that at some point this is crossing the line and this is an invasion of people's expected privacy. Now, Councilmember Cash mentioned not having an expectation to privacy on the street, and I respectfully disagree. When I'm driving down the street, if I am committing a crime, I can expect that an officer could pull up behind me at any moment and run my tags. If my tags are expired, if I am speeding, if I did a hit and run, if I did any of those things and the officer's behind me, yes, I can expect an officer to run my tags. If I am just driving down the street, minding my business, and I'm not speeding, I'm going within the speed limit, I'm not doing anything illegal, I am not operating under the guise that those officers are running the plates of every single person that's on that street. So we do have an expectation of privacy, and I understand the law may say there's no reasonable expectation if you're on a public street, but individuals that are driving in communities do have an expectation of privacy. I understand that there may be a difference in the technical term of surveillance, but to people in the community, it does feel like surveillance. And we've heard from multiple people in the communities who feel as though this will disproportionately impact primarily minority communities and low-income communities. And my last point, Chair, to the question about mobile units, I agree with Council Member Gamble, who made the point, if you're talking about a unit that's not stationary, what protection will people have that these mobile units will not be disproportionately placed in low-income communities or communities of color or communities that feel as though, and that data supports that they may have been disproportionately over-policed by having these mobile units placed in whatever community people feel like they should be placed in. You're running a risk of marginalized communities further being over-policed, which will further harm the relationship between our police department and our communities. And I think that we all have a duty, a responsibility, and quite frankly, a goal of wanting to improve the relationship between our police departments and between our communities and our marginalized communities. And I don't see this as being a tool that's going to help bridge the gap between those communities. So thank you, Chair, for getting me, allowing me to speak, and thank you, Councilmember Rosenberg, for allowing me, for telling them that I wanted to speak.
Glad we could get you hooked up. Council Member Sepulveda, and then Parker, and then Benedict.
Thank you, Chair, and Councilwoman Porterfield's daughter actually had the same thought I did. It is a choice when we choose to park in some of these private parking areas. I wanted to touch on the data aspect of this. You know, no matter what we decide to do with LPRs, at the end of the day, ICE could still subpoena those records. Just a reminder for everyone. And if I'm not mistaken, Attorney Cooper told us at the last meeting that all of this is subject to open record requests. Am I mistaken on that? I do see Attorney Cooper on.
You're correct. That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. So I guess that brings me to my point. You know, we are putting the everyday life of Nashvillians at risk. We risk the fact that, you know, a stalker might request these records. We have a lot of people that go through domestic issues. And so it brings up the point that, you know, we could be putting several lives at risk and you know, making Nashvillians afraid to leave their homes. And that's just a reminder for everyone.
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess sort of following up on Councilmember Sepulveda's comments, you know, a lot of, especially with the fact of this stuff being subject to public records, that gives me a lot of concern, because I know that the point has been made that this data is not especially meaningful without connection to a database showing, you know, who owns a license plate or what, you know, to whom the vehicle is registered for a given license plate. But, you know, a bad actor, an adversary, can certainly observe an individual target's vehicle's tag, and then could use this data to determine that target's travel patterns, what times of day they're home, what times of day they're not home, things like that. So, I mean, that's sort of the fundamental issue with building surveillance infrastructure, is that it can be abused in those ways. And again, you don't need, you know, if I know your place of work and I watch you leave and get into your car, I can observe that tag number. So I don't need access to the big, well-protected database if I know your tag number, and then I could theoretically garner a lot of information about a person if I had, you know, requested all this data through open records. So I mean, that remains a concern to me. Just building the infrastructure that compiles this data creates potential for abuse, and I'm not sure if there's any way around that. But thank you, Chair, for recognition.
Yeah, I think the way around that is to limit the amount of time that we keep the data. Once it's dumped, it's dumped. And I mean, respectfully, I think if I'm a bad actor and I want to know, I can sit a block from your home and see what time you leave and know if you're not home. And to both points, where they have been used, most of these things that people are talking about being in fear of have just not been the case. I mean, we're not starting something new here. It's been used in a lot of places. But point taken, and it is something we have to be careful about. I mean, that's why we're talking so much about policy. Council Lady Benedict, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate this time. I appreciate everybody's time. I'm going to have to roll here in just a minute for a community meeting of my own. But, you know, Councilwoman Porterfield shared a lot of the thoughts that I had on this. And I thought it was, she shared many more than what I had. And I think they are the result of what her daughter had to share. But as we look at this, you know, one aspect of this job that we do is to determine and balance the risk, right? That has to do with all of our residents. And so when we look at the police work that we need done, that's about the risk to, you know, that's associated with, you know, the victims of a crime. At the same time, we have to determine and balance what is the risk that we're putting in place to every Nashvilleian. And I would wager that, and I don't even need to wager it, we can look and see that the majority of Nashvilleians are not the criminals that we are using, that we are thinking that we will catch by implementing this program or LPRs overall. So I think that our job is to look and see, you know, what's the violation? And a lot of my colleagues tonight have talked about this. What are we doing in looking at people's lives and their cars and surveilling them in one form or another, however you want to call it, as far as calling it surveillance or not. You know, we continue to touch on that. It's, sorry, my mind's on my next meeting as I think about this. And my point was that as we balance this risk, it's so much more important to me that we look at the people who are being surveilled, who have no culpability of anything, right? So you're taking my information, you're taking everybody's information, and you're using it for you're capturing it, and there's still risk that that information is going to be used in a manner that is outside of sorry, I'm way off track. I should just probably stop here. Most of what I want to say has been said. I just wanted to make sure that I voiced my opinion that Councilmember Rosenberg, Councilmember Porterfield are on target with my concerns, and I want to make sure that we are protecting Nashvilleians' interests and information and not overstepping what we should be doing. To me, the implementation of LPRs countywide would be detrimental to the way that I believe, should be managing law enforcement. And so I hope that we're able to find a way, if there are things that we should look at in regards to putting these in police cars. You know, I appreciate that we're having this discussion, this dialogue, but I really continue to fall in line with this is an overstep. This is not a place that you know, if a neighborhood association wants to put this in place, then good. But if the government wants to put this in place, we have to make sure the safeguards are there. And I think there's just too much risk. I don't think the safeguards are, I don't think that they will capture the protection that we need to have for Nashvilleians. So again, I know I got a little off track and wandered there, Chair, but I appreciate your time and indulgence. And again, I do appreciate the opportunity to discuss this and the special committee meeting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. I have Council Member Stiles, Johnston, and Cash again.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have had, not only this evening, but over the last few months, very robust conversation in regards to LPRs. And I think that as we are going to be having one more meeting, and then we're coming upon having conversation on the floor and voting, that we take what we've heard, the concerns, and what we have tried to craft thus far in terms of legislation, figure out if what's there works towards the concerns. I think there are those that will never be in support. There are those that are always going to be in support. I think we are starting to veer off, and I think we need to become a little bit more focused on what we have in front of us. How do we address what we have? because that's what we're going to be voting on. And how do we make the policies work? We've seen how they failed in other cities. I think our goal needs to be, how do we create successful legislation for Nashville? There are a lot of people that would like this equipment. And I think a lot of great work has been done across the board in learning about the equipment, what the equipment can do, what it can't do, the differences between, getting pulled over and being asked for your license versus someone running a plate that gives you absolutely no personal information whatsoever. Some of this is personal versus professional. So let's try and whittle it down and figure out what we can do, what's going to be good legislation that we can come up with. Not everyone's going to be happy, but there is a happy medium. And I think we need to start moving our conversation towards that direction. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Council Lady Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. As far as open records goes, there is a House bill and a Senate bill in the state legislature right now that will line item out LPR data from open records requests. So for people that are worried about, that's stalking, that type of thing, it has bipartisan support. I fully expect it to pass with no problem, actually, before we even talk about this on the floor, second meeting in April. I am reducing our retention rate for 582 from 30 days to 10 days. That should help ease people's minds as well. And also to several people's point about, most people are not criminals. You're absolutely correct. And I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it's going to hover probably around 99%, that most of the data that is in that database that's going to be held for, if we do this, for 10 days, will never even be seen. It will never even be seen because you haven't committed a crime. Nobody's watching you. People really don't care that Courtney Johnston goes to the Publix in Nippers Corner. That's not what this is for. It's only searched when a crime is committed. Don't we want to solve crimes when crimes are committed? Absolutely. It's not for, I think Councilman Nash is doing something bad. I'm going to watch him for a little bit. That is specifically prohibited. That is surveillance. That is specifically prohibited in this legislation. It is only searchable when a crime is committed, and there are audit trails. There are, only specific people are allowed access to it in the first place. There's an incredible amount of training that's going forth. It's just every single one of the concerns that people have, I feel like, has been addressed and addressed in a very airtight way. Are there mistakes going to be made? Probably. People are, we're human. It happens. But is this a pretty solid policy, and will it get even better after these conversations that I know we're going to continue to have? I know Ms. Stiles has a substitute. There's some great stuff in there. There's actually a piece in Councilman Rosenberg's that I've added into one of my amendments that I thought was good for accountability. I think when we all come together and add our 2 cents on how we can make this better, we're going to have a really, really great policy, and we're going to make this county safer. Thank you.
We have 2 minutes, and I think I'm safe to just close. I want to thank everyone for your input. I think this has been a great discussion, far better than we could have in the 10 minutes or 15 minutes before a meeting sometime. Just to get the sense of our fellow council members has been really, I think, a great thing tonight, and I appreciate y'all joining in and sharing your concerns, and I do appreciate the work that a lot of people are doing on this issue. I think with us all working together, that we may well come to something that we can all be proud of in the final end. Have a great night, unless somebody has something just they're driven to say before we close out. Going once, going twice. Good night, everybody. Thank you again.
Good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.